Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. You are safe here. You are warm. The sounds of the night wrap around you like a blanket. Outside, the world is quiet. The streets are empty. The houses are dark. But in the spaces between and the shadows where the street lights don't reach, that is where the stories live. Tonight's story takes us to a county fair where the funhouse mirrors show you more than you want to see. The county fair came to town every summer. It set up in the field behind the old schoolhouse. The rides were loud. The food was greasy. The games were rigged, but the people came anyway. They came for the noise. They came for the lights. They came for the feeling of being somewhere that was not home. The couple's names were David and Sarah. They were in their 30s. They had been married for 5 years. They loved the fair. They went every year. They rode the rides. They ate the food. They played the games. They held hands. They laughed. They were happy. This year, they found the mirror house. It was at the back of the fair, behind the carousel, behind the lemonade stand. It was a large tent. Inside, it was filled with mirrors, hundreds of them. Mirrors that curve and bent and distorted. Mirrors that made you tall and thin. Mirrors that made you short and wide. Mirrors that made you look like a stranger. David and Sarah entered the mirror house. The attendant took their tickets. The door closed behind them. They were inside. The mirrors surrounded them. They could see themselves everywhere. Reflections of reflections. Copies of copies. Infinite versions of themselves stretching into the distance. They laughed. They posed. They made funny faces. They took selfies. They had fun. The mirror house was silly. It was harmless. It was the kind of thing couples did at the fair. And then David noticed something. One of his reflections was wrong. He was standing in front of a curved mirror, and his reflection was there. It was standing where he was standing. It was doing what he was doing. But it was not exactly right. It was a fraction of a second behind. When he moved his right hand, his reflection moved its right hand. But a moment later, a delay, a lag. He looked closer. The reflection was not a delay. It was independent. It was moving on its own. It was mimicking him. But it was not him. It was something else. Something that looked like him. Something that moved like him. But something that was not him. Sarah, he said, look at this. Sarah walked over. She stood beside him. She looked at the mirror. She saw David. She saw his reflection. She saw the reflection moving independently. She saw it turn its head. She saw it smile. She saw it look at her. David, she said, that is not funny. It is not me, he said. I am not doing that. They both watched the reflection. It stood in the mirror. It looked at them. It was David. It looked exactly like David. But it was not David. It was something else. Something that had taken his form. Something that was wearing his face. The reflection raised its hand. It waved. A slow, deliberate wave. The wave of someone who knew something. The wave of someone who had a secret. David stepped back. Sarah stepped back. They looked at each other. They looked at the mirror. The reflection was still there. It was still waving. It was still smiling. It was still looking at them. They moved to another mirror. A different shape. A different distortion. They stood in front of it and they looked at their reflections. Their reflections looked back, and in this mirror the reflections were normal. They moved when they moved, they smiled when they smiled. They were copies, true reflections. But then Sarah noticed something. Behind her reflection, in the background of the mirror, there was another figure, small, distant, standing in the space between the mirrors. It was a person. It was wearing white. It was not moving. It was just standing there, watching. Sarah turned around. She looked behind her. The space between the mirrors was empty. There was no one there. She looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there, still standing, still watching, still not moving. "David," she said, "there is someone behind me." David looked. He looked at the mirror. He looked behind her. He saw nothing. He looked at the mirror again. The figure was there. It was closer now. It had moved. It was standing directly behind Sarah's reflection. It was looking at her reflections back. They left the mirror. They walked to the exit. They pushed through the door. They were outside. The fair was loud. The rides were running. The people were laughing. The air was warm. They were safe. But when they turned to look at the mirror house, they saw something that stopped them. The attendant was standing by the door. He was looking at them. He was shaking his head. He was saying something. They could not hear him over the noise of the fair, but they could read his lips. He was saying, "You should not have gone in. You should not have looked. Now they will follow you." David and Sarah went home that night. They locked the door. They drew the curtains. They sat on the couch. They tried to forget, but they could not forget, because in the mirror of the bathroom, in the reflection of the window, in the surface of the television screen, they saw it, the reflection, standing behind them, not moving, not speaking, just watching, just waiting, and the mirrors were empty. The reflections were gone, but the thing that had taken their place was still there, in every reflective surface, in every glass, in every drop of water, watching, waiting, patient. You are safe here. The mirrors are just mirrors. The reflections are just reflections. But if you see yourself move when you have not moved, do not look too closely. Close your eyes. Let the darkness hold you. Sleep well.